So we are continuing with our next speaker. This is Brecht. He's also a regular here, right? How many NGBs have you done already?
I think all of them, yeah.
Yeah.
There was 1 year where I didn't give a training, but I attended, so I was here every year.
Okay. Yeah, that's a regular. And Brecht is going to talk about getting crazy productive with forms and AI. And I personally hope that it will solve all of my problems with the reactive forms, but we'll see about that. So give him a warm round of applause and welcome on stage, Brecht.
Thank you. Thank you. So this talk is about getting extremely productive with Angular forms. So my name is Brecht. I'm a front-end architect. I usually speak on conferences. I travel the world. I've been in a lot of Angular projects, sometimes for a long time, sometimes only for a few hours. I'm a consultant and I'm building NitroKit.ai, which is a Angular boilerplate that it started out as a boilerplate, and now I built in an AI agent as well. It's helping me. You can check it out if you like. So, who loves Angular forms? You do? Okay. No, don't want to be negative, but we all struggled with forms in the past, right? So we have reactive forms, template-driven forms, and reactive have been the standard for a while. Like they have this reactive API, and template-driven forms, they were advised for simple things. At least in the docs, they stated that. But behind the scenes are actually reactive forms. They also form controls, form groups, but it basically lets Angular do all the work for you. So let's do an implementation of a form. So it should contain the following fields: first name, last name, age, emergency contact, a gender, also a gender other. The gender other is only shown when gender is set to other. Emergency contact is disabled when the person is of legal age. There's also a passwords form group that contains a password and confirm passwords. Password is required and confirm password is required, but only when there is a password. On the password form group, we should validate if both password and confirm password match. The following fields are required: first name, last name, and age. When the first name is set to Brecht, set the age to 36. Next week is 37, but today it's still 36. And also add a required VAT number that validates against a valid VAT number. Like, creating that form, how much time would it take? Like, in general, like half an hour, something like that. It has a lot of conditional stuff. Let me quickly grab some water because I have a little bit of a cold. So, the setup. These are the fields that it should contain. First name, last name, age. I'm going to go over that again. Like, let's go to the next slide and just show you the setup. We have some form controls for our first name, last name, and so on. And we have a form group. We all know what a form control and a form group is. These are the basic building blocks of our Angular forms. So we inject the form builder, and we use the group method to construct that form. This should be recognizable for everyone. So in the HTML, we have a form group, and so this is how we tell our form, like this is the form group that you need to use. And then we have a form control name for everything, and a form group name for all our form groups, which again also contains control. So this is like the basic building blocks, and that is kind of cool. It's not complex, but it's also kind of basic, right? For the template-driven form setup, since we have signals now, it became also kind of easy. So we create the simple type, which is deep partial. With deep partial, I mean that every property is partial, and their properties are also partial. Because an Angular template-driven form will actually construct the form for you. Like every form field will automatically get added to that. So that means that everything is partial. And then we have a passwords form group, which has a password and a confirmed password. And we just create a signal holding an empty object. So this is the TypeScript side. And in the HTML, we get a reference to the ngform directive. And when we listen to the input, we update the form. We update the signal. So that's basically it. And we use the name attribute and the ng model to construct our form controls. So what is particular about this is that I do not use the banana in the box syntax. So I actually have some kind of unidirectional data flow where that just reads my signal and it just like feeds the data, and when the form gets updated, it uses the input. I use ngModel group that will automatically create a form group for us behind the scenes. And this is basically the setup. It's a little bit bigger than the reactive forms for now because we have the name attribute that we need to use. So in the reactive setup, we have a form builder, we have a form control, form group, form control name, the form group name. And with the template-driven form, we have a plain type. We use a signal, use the name directive and the name attribute and those two directive. All right. So conditional fields, the gender order is only shown when the gender is set to other. Now, how would we do that with a reactive form? We have this cool reactive API. The value changes. So we can pipe to the gender. And then we have to do the string till change so it doesn't emit that often. And then we have to avoid memory leaks. So we use the take until destroyed. And then manually we subscribe and we can add the control and remove the control because otherwise the value will be kept in our form, and that is not what we want. But we also have to do this because otherwise we'll get an error, right? Because it will try to use the form control name and it doesn't exist anymore. So with a template-driven form, it becomes a little bit easier because you can just create a computed signal and you can just use that computed signal. And Angular does all the work for us. Like Angular will automatically remove that form control, but it will also automatically add the form control for us. So we don't do the heavy lifting, Angular is. So in the reactive setup, you have to manually do some stuff. You have to subscribe. You have to make sure you don't have memory leaks. You have some condition in the template. And in the template-driven setup, you also have the conditional in the template. But you just have a computed simple signal, and Angular is doing the heavy lifting. What about disabled fields? Like, I added this emergency contact there, but when the person is of legal age, it doesn't matter to have an emergency contact. I don't know. I know that's ridiculous, but in my world, that works for now. So we want to disable it when the person is of legal age. So again, let's dive into the reactive approach. We all know that, right? Again, the value changes, and we subscribe, and we distinct till changed, and we take until destroy, and then we subscribe again. And then when the age is higher than 18, we disable it, and otherwise we enable it. But sometimes we also have to worry about the emit event. Sometimes it's false, sometimes it's true, sometimes it triggers something, that triggers something, that triggers something. And in a template, we don't have to do anything, it just works. So for the template-driven approach, again, we have a simple computed signal. And we have a disabled attribute that we can use. One of the main reasons why people are not fan of template-driven forms is template logic. I don't see any template logic. And that's the cool thing about signals, because now we have computed signals, and these are simple functions. And I'm all about simplifying things, so I really like that approach. So again, for the reactive setup, we have to subscribe, we have to distinct, you have to manually disable, enable. But why do we use a framework if we don't let it work for us, right? I mean, I like the fact that Angular knows how to disable things automatically by a simple computed signal. I love the fact that it removes and adds controls for us. And this is a simple example, but if you use form arrays or whatever, no, there is no such thing as an actual form array in template-driven forms, but you can do the same approach and it will just automatically add and remove and disable and enable, and you don't have to worry about that stuff. And to be quite fair, those template-driven forms, if you really want that value changes API, you can just have access to it if you want to, right? Because behind the scenes, there are form controls and form groups. So when the first name is set to Brecht, set the age to 36. Let's go to the reactive forms. Again, we have this nice value changes thing, and now we map it to the first name, distinct, take until destroyed. And when the name is Brecht, we patch the value, and we make sure that we do not emit any event. There are multiple ways of handling that in template-driven forms, but I think this is the most simple one. We don't use banana in the box, we don't use ng-model change because we have our input on our form on top, but here now we do have like this little hook with a function called first name changed, which does the same thing. Like if you're new to Angular, I'm thinking like this is going to be easier to understand for a newbie than the more complex approach. So this is the entire implementation of my template-driven form. And I haven't done any validations yet. We'll get to that later. But that's not that much, right? I mean, so just a few simple signals that are computed any type. And in the model, we have the ng-model change that I just showed. We have the disabled property and an if statement. That's it. And this is the reactive approach. I don't want to say anything wrong about reactive forms. I'm just saying like this is more code, and it's more complexity, and you need to know like RxJS. And I prefer to have it simple. But let's talk about validations. Now, I know you love forms, but do you love validations? You also love validations. Okay, are there people that don't love validations? If you are waking up. That love validation, sorry, yeah. No, there's nobody. Okay, so password is required and confirm password is required, but only when there is a password. So that's a conditional right there. On the passwords form group, we should validate if both password and confirm password match. The following fields are required: first name, last name, and age. Also add a required VAT number that validates against a valid VAT number. I don't like that. I never did. Probably never will, because they're kind of painful. You have this has error thing, and then you need to manually say like, okay, if this is an error, then show this. If that error is there, then show that. It boils down to some boilerplate code, and yeah, I like to have things automated. So you can add like validators.required there, and you can add some custom validators like a password match validator and a VAT validator. And sometimes you have to set them conditionally. And like I said, like this form could be explained in like this one paragraph. We've all been working with these big forms with a lot of validations and conditionals and stuff like that. So here we have this my form gender value changes. And now we have to set the validators manually, but we also have to clear the validators sometimes. Sometimes we have to manually update the value and validity. Sometimes, so for password, we have to do that as well. Then we have like a password match validator, and we have a VAT validator, and this is all pure Angular logic, which is not reusable anywhere else. And which can be cumbersome to implement. But what if we could simplify this drastically? Like, what if you could do something like this? Like, we could test the first name, which is the field, and then we just pass it the message that we want, and then we have a simple enforcement rule. Like, this kind of looks like a unit test, and it's very easy to unit test as well. Let's say that the gender other is required, but you can ignore that rule when the gender is not set to other. Like, this is readable for me. Like, I can understand what's going on here. I can reuse it on the back end. I can reuse it whether I'm doing Angular or React or Quick or whatever framework that I'm using. This makes sense. So you could also, no, this is the same I already showed, but you could check the model of passwords. If the password is not there, then the confirm password is not required, otherwise it is. And you also can do it on form groups. So what you see in the first argument of that test function is the field. So that could be passwords, or it could be passwords.confirm, or it could be like in some kind of form array. You can go deep into that. You could also do VAT numbers and use a regex here. So what did I just show you? This is a framework. It's called Vest.js, and it just focuses on validation. It's created by Eviatar Alush. I'm sorry if I pronounce his name wrong. He's a very friendly guy, also helpful. He's a software developer at Meta. And the cool thing about Vest is it's framework agnostic. It's readable, it's testable, composable, reusable, and it allows for very complex validations. But so Vest and Angular, like, what do they have to do with each other? Because Vest is doing validation, and Angular has their own way of doing forms. So I created this thing called ngx-vest-forms, and before I promote it, I would advise you all to not just install any ngx npm package. So you can use it if you want to, or you can just copy-paste it. It's really small. I know I'm not selling this very well right now. It's stable. I'm using it on my own stuff. And I know a few people that use it in production as well. But it's really like this very thin connector between your Angular form and that beautiful suite that I just showed you. So how do we use it? We have a form, and we pass it the sc-vest-form directive. We pass it a suite, a form value, and then we have a form value change output that just sets the value. And then we have an sc control wrapper, which does content projection for us and just shows the errors. So this is not that much code. We still have to use the name and the ng model, of course, because we're doing template-driven forms. But this is basically what our template can look like for a very simple form. So I'm going to show you how ngx-vest-forms works, because it's actually really easy. And like, this talk is also, I'm very much inspired by the talks from Wardwell from ngconf 2021, 2022. So what we actually do is we will just hook into ng model, and then we create our own directive. So the people that used template-driven forms probably use directives for their validations, right? So what if you could have like this one Uber directive that behind the scenes goes to Vest, executes Vest, and puts those errors directly on your form? That means that you could actually, you're not patching Angular. You're just creating a directive that Angular supports for you already, but that directive just goes to a suite that you can reuse, puts it back on. So this is a simplified version. To be quite honest, if you would open the actual file on my repo, I think it's like 2 lines more or something, so it's actually pretty simple. So the ng model gets called, this validate function gets triggered, goes to vest, puts the errors on. The same goes for the ng model group. Again, it implements the async validator. It validates the function, and that's it. And then we have the form directive, and the form directive has the create async validator function. This is a little bit simplified, but I just create an observable because I use async validators, and that one calls a suite. It calls a suite with a form model, with a field. It gets the errors, and it returns them. So I'm not hacking into Angular. I'm just creating a directive that is using a framework that is very much tailored to do one specific thing, and it's one specific thing that we've been struggling forever. I mean, I have. I'm not going to say you all have, but I've been struggling with forms forever, and I know you do too. A little bit. Okay, so this is the wrapper, the SE control wrapper. So again, this is kind of easy. Does content projection, loops over the errors, and just renders them. So we don't interfere with Angular. We keep the form as is. Basically, the input changes, the ng model gets triggered. Async validator is created. It calls vest and puts errors on the form console. So what do we need? A form model, a shape, a validation suite, and a form component. Now, I'm not going to dive too deeply into the form shape because we're on limited time, but basically, template-driven forms, the name and the ng model group directives are not type safe. So I created this thing where you pass a form shape, and then it throws you errors at runtime when you made a typo. So it works well for simple forms, but also advanced forms, form arrays, form validation over form arrays, and form validation over form groups of form arrays. So let's say that you have a form array with a from time and a to time. So you have multiple rows, and you could basically validate if the from time from the second row is not before the to time of the first row. Like these kind of validations over different types of form groups and form controls work really well. So what about Gen AI? Like I've been very invested in Gen AI lately. I've been working on AI tooling full-time for, I think, the last 6 months, something like that. When you give it garbage, you will get garbage back. That's how it works. But if you have like very strict rules and tailored context, you get really amazing results. So I built NitroKit AI. It started as a hobby project. Now I'm actually using it to create full CRUD features in existing projects. I want to show you the results. So this is kind of small, so I will read it for you. Generate a form in the project code assistant feed shell, unexported, because I don't want to export it to the barrel file, with the name demo with the following implementation. And then I just copy-pasted the text that we have seen in the beginning. And after a while, sorry, I will get back to that later. First, this slide. Prompt chaining and few-shot prompting. So who of you knows prompt engineering? Who has done some prompt engineering? Okay, that's a few. So everybody's probably like talking to ChatGPT from time to time, and you give it some stuff, and then you get something back, and then you're frustrated because it's not what you expect. That's the kind of thing that you can fix by doing prompt engineering. A few simple things that I want to teach you now is like prompt chaining is one of the most important things. It means that you create like very small prompts that do one specific thing, and based on the result of that prompt, then you call another LLM with another prompt. And few-shot prompting is basically giving some examples. Like, for instance, I want to write a unit test. I want to write a unit test for a vest suite, and this is an already existing unit test for that vest suite. This is a completely different prompt than you would have said, like, generate me a unit test. So what I do first is I get the form model and the shape based on my previous message. Then I get the UI components from my design system, so it infers which components make sense to use. Like, is it an input? Is it a text area? Is it an autocomplete? And then it creates the form validations, like the vest suite form validations, and then it creates the get form component, which is the actual component, and then we get confetti, and we have some files that are generated. And I'm going to go over these files. Like, if you are interested in just getting that specific prompt, just send me an email, and I'll gladly give it to you. I know this is pretty small, but I had to take a screenshot, and so I'm just going to go over it. It created all my form controls, but also the SE control wrapper, the ng model group, so it knew that password and confirmed password had to be inside a passwords group. And then it created our form control, but in there it also created like these computed signals, because I told it should not write template logic. So these are computed signals, these are testable, kind of easy to use. And here as well, when the first name is Brecht, he set it to 36. It's on a different way that we have done it, and that's fine. If I wanted to make sure that he uses a template function like the ng model change, I would just have to refine my prompt. And sometimes the model will hallucinate a little bit, but that's fine. Then we have our form model and form shape that it creates, and our entire vest suite. And you see that it's, or you don't see because it's a little small, sorry, but you see here that it uses like the omit when, it checks for the password, but also for the passwords that match. So what about the future? Like, will AI take our jobs? I don't think it will take our jobs, but I would definitely invest in using AI, because the future is near and it's really snowballing. So I would advise to start prompting a little bit. It's not that hard, and to just start embracing AI. So next week I'm doing an online workshop for people that are interested. There's a 30% discount for NGBE for all my products. I've written an AI book to build AI agents in Angular. So check that out. And for the rest, I want to thank you for having me.